Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga Chapter review. This one's going to be for Chapter 73, which is called A Special Mission. So I think it's pretty fair to say about this, if you read this chapter, I can't really see many people having like too much of an opposing view on this, but like this really was not that good of a chapter. I don't think it was an like actively bad chapter, but I don't really see where the points in the chapter are to like heavily praise it or anything like that. This again is a chapter that very much represents Boruto and all of the problems that come along with everything about it. The format, the way some of the writing is being done, it's just not quite coming together in the way that we want. There is still some very interesting stuff going on in terms of like eventually we will get to kind of bigger moments, but this chapter just had so little to say. And now that's a weird thing to say about the chapter because it was like all dialogue. There was so much dialogue in this chapter, but so little of the information presented was new. And I think that's part of the problem with this. I didn't expect this to be an eventful chapter. When I did my speculation on this like a week or two ago, I was kind of like, well, it's the second of 4 chapters in this volume. This is like usually the worst positioned chapter in a group of 4. Because it's not the third one where it's the sort of setup for the last chapter, and it's not the last chapter, which is usually the big cliffhanger ending or setup for the next volume. This is just the role-playing kind of part of the volume. And that's really the way that this one went. When I really felt if there was ever a time to deliver, this was a chapter to show that you were willing to do something a little bit more. But no, this is just another Boruto chapter, and I don't hate it, but I think in a couple of weeks, the last few weeks for Boruto, and this was the Boruto fandom, I think you have seen a lot of people's frustrations really come out with sort of in a way where the franchise is. I'm not as like upset about kind of what's going on in the anime at the moment, but definitely I think the manga is struggling. And I think we've seen that with regards to some of the numbers that have come out for sort of like Japanese manga sales. They need to get to the time skip like soon. I think that's the real hope that a lot of people have, is that coming back, having the characters, their older designs, getting to whatever incident is going to end this like half of Boruto and jump into the second half. That is the boost that we so badly need. But let's get into going through this chapter sort of page by page, because it's one of those ones where like, look, you're not going to read through this and love every single page, but there are some good moments as we go through it. But anyway, we open up, and of course, Team 7 has been called into Shikamaru's office. They've got a mission. So we have Boruto, Mitsuki, Sarada arriving in, and straight away they meet Kawaki, and also Sumire is there as well. So nice to see her there, and just some quick hellos and stuff like that. But interestingly, Konohamaru is here as well. And I do have to say about this is one of the things with the manga, of course, is that they do not know how to use multiple characters. And going into this chapter, Konohamaru did not once enter my mind for a character who would in any way be involved in this. I borderline forgot that Konohamaru was a character in the manga, just because of how little focus other characters apart from like our main cast get in the manga. So seeing him there was just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess if there's a full Team 7 thing, it would make sense for Konohamaru to be included. But as we go on to see, it's just kind of like, oh, the focus is once again on Boruto and Kawaki, and the others are just doing stuff, basically. But anyway, we go on. And so we begin Shikamaru talking and just not saying as much as you would ever really want. So basically he presents the idea that Boruto and Kawaki are both basically ticking time bombs for the village. Boruto, because they don't know how him being an Otsutsuki now, they're not really sure about the whole Momoshiki stuff. They still have that fear, even though maybe the obvious threat with him is gone. And then finally Shikamaru addresses the idea of like, yeah, Kawaki, you're basically the most powerful character in the village. And because of that, we can't really control you. And sure, you're kind of friendly, you're on our side, but that is something that we do have to like address and deal with here. So there's a bit of tension that comes up here, but this is where Mitsuki and like Sarada come in to just sort of like, hey Kawaki, this is a fair point, you know, let him say it. So he's kind of pointing out that like, I don't want to in a way have to use you on these missions, but because of the unique situation we're heading into, we unfortunately have to use our 2 giant bombs to be the head of this mission, basically. So he basically catches everyone up to speed. Again, the problem with this is that this is all information that we as the audience know. We know that Shikamaru knows this, we know what it is, but we have to sit here while he explained to the other characters what we already know. And so it's just pages upon pages going by where nothing except a recap is basically happening here. So this is where he introduces everyone to the idea of Ada and her main ability that they're worried about, which is to enchant everyone around her. Later on in the chapter, he'll explain the kind of ability to see everything situation, but that's kind of what we get here. So he highlights that the way her ability works is extremely powerful. The only people who won't be affected by it are Boruto and Kawaki because they are Otsutsuki. And so that's the highlight of like, okay, Sarada, Mitsuki, any hope for them really getting too much of the focus? Not really at play here necessarily. So then we get to the idea of like, oh, the mission isn't to take Ada out, it's what? And then we cut to Ada and Amado and Demon on the train. But I had a pretty like, you know, big reaction to just this switch of like, really? We are, what, pages 14 and 15? We're like, what, I guess, not including the cover first page, like 13 pages into this 40 and a bit page chapter. And we still don't know what the mission is. There's your problem with pacing. A simple thing of they've come to see Shikamaru to find out what their mission is. And we go through more than a quarter of the chapter and they still haven't told us what it is. Now, the second we come back, they get to it straight away, but still, you can see what the problem is. So, anyway, Ada is kind of like, oh, I wonder what he's planning. And it's just to catch us up to the fact that, oh, they're on the train. I guess they're on their way here. But you're almost, if you're not paying full attention, you're almost like, oh, she's just thinking that he's the one planning things out. But then you remember, oh, she can just basically watch and hear what they're saying. So she is effectively part of this conversation, even though she can't directly interact, which is an interesting dynamic throughout the entire chapter. So this is where Shikamaru does explain that, like, okay, what has happened here is that Code doesn't have his limiter on. That's happened. But Ada has left Code, and now they're in this kind of weird situation here where he is bringing her and Demon to the village, and there's a chance that she is not our enemy, but it's a very precarious situation, effectively. And that's the kind of threat that he points out, that if she comes to the village and decides not to play nice, she basically becomes the leader of the village, because everyone except Boruto and Kawaki is just going to be under her control effectively. And that's a kind of pretty bad thing to happen. So this is really important. They need to get her on side. So the mission is that they have to cohabitate. They're all like, what? Live together? And they're like, oh, actually, the specifics of this are this way. That the only ones who will be like living together will be Boruto, Kawaki, and Ada. Everyone else won't be, of course, because of the way Ada's powers work. So it's more of like, they'll be living together, everyone else will be like observing them, and that's the situation. This is the fun part of this chapter, is that we get the cutaway to like Ada on the train, of course, listening in, and she's just like, oh my god, living together from the start, like we haven't even properly met yet, we'll be living together straight away. Like, it just shows you how kind of smitten she is with the idea, the prospect of meeting someone who won't immediately fall under her spell. Which is funny because it feels like she's already under like Kawaki's spell, even though he doesn't have a spell. That's just how the dynamic is. Again, it is weird that this is the focus of the manga at this point, because like Code does not appear in this chapter. And yes, we know his attack is going to come eventually, but this being the sort of like big reveal of this is where the plot is going. This isn't just this thing where like Ada's going to arrive in the village, we'll have a few meetings, and she'll just sort of like live there from that here on out. It really does feel like we're going into like, I guess we're going to have a couple of chapters that are full on just about Ada interacting with Kawaki and Boruto. So that feels like there's a gap there for that to happen, but it also feels like Code's attack has to come in immediately. So how is this all going to sort of play out when it actually happens? So, and yeah, everyone just has to kind of watch what's going on here. Again, reading through all this dialogue just to try and pick out what is actually important about this. So this is where he has to reveal the whole idea of like, okay, I know quite a bit about her, you don't know all of it. They're kind of like, wait, why would she agree to this if she's only coming here to maybe negotiate? And he's kind of like, I have a feeling that she'll be completely up for this suggestion. And Mitsuki's like, why would you think that? And he's kind of like, well, it's a bit weird, but it's crucial to the mission. Ada has a crush on you, Kawaki. And again, we cut back to her, and she's like, oh, he said it. Shika dear, how could you do this? And Demon just notes that like her heart rate has gone like way, way up. So this is really, really affecting her. And she even says that right now I am truly fatally in love. So that's the dynamic that they're going for. They're setting up that this meeting is going to be pretty important, however it happens. So he then Shikamaru focuses on Kawaki, and effectively is like, I don't want to mess with your personal life or your feelings or anything like that, but I would urge you to be sort of like careful with how you interact with Ada, that your relationship with her will kind of determine the fate of the Leaf Village overall. So that's an interesting one. Boruto then, he's the one to point out the obvious thing of like, hey, any ordinary person crushes on Ada, right? She's got a huge pool to pick from. Why go after Kawaki, whom her ability doesn't work on? She could pick anyone. So why is she like worried about romance necessarily? So they actually have Sumire be the one to, in a way, present Ada's more true thoughts on the matter, because most of the time they play it up very comedically that anytime Kawaki gets mentioned she just starts blushing and stuff like that, but the truth and reality of it behind the scenes, of course, is like Sumire says here, is that it's not very meaningful necessarily if people fall for you just because of this like ability. It forcibly happens. She actually wants an ordinary romance, this very simple concept. That is what she actually wants. And they do cut to Ada, and we do get a serious kind of reaction, which is kind of interesting. Kawaki does say, I don't get it, that's just plain illogical, maybe she's stupid. And this is where Shikamaru reveals that she can see everything and hear it all. That's another part of her ability that she has. And this does surprise everyone. They're like, whoa, She can watch everything. She can replay past events. Everything that's been said up to now, consider her to basically already know it, is the idea here. So Kawaki points out that yes, you want us to monitor Ada, but play nice with her as much as possible. And Kawaki just points out, I'd rather throw myself at Code, but they don't know where he is, and basically if they get Ada on their side, they have Demon on their side, and so they have the power to actually completely just hard counter Code that way. And so this is where we address the whole idea of like, okay, what's Boruto's role in all of this? Because, okay, she has the crush on Kawaki, but what about Boruto? So Konohamaru says that his job doesn't just consist of monitoring Ada. You also be there to mediate between Kawaki and Ada. That they don't trust Kawaki to lean into this enough. So they're kind of, in a way, saying, Boruto, matchmake these two almost. Prevent Kawaki from ruining this. And I think this sort of makes sense because Boruto, sort of like Naruto, has that, power of, like, we've seen it before. He can meet like a new character, get them on his side. That is not something that Kawaki necessarily seems to have. But we've obviously, in the recent anime arc that's going on right now, you've maybe seen that there's a little bit more of that within him. But with the wrong person, his attitude won't necessarily work. So that's what's going on there. So Boruto's annoyed that this is what he's going to have to be doing. And then Konohamaru says, in addition, Sarada, Mitsuki, and you will be watching the three of them outside together with me. Your main job will be sending us status reports and to jump in and defuse the situation if any trouble breaks out. Since we have no, and again, this is also because they don't know if anything will go wrong with Boruto as well, so they're also watching out for that. That the other aspect of this is that Boruto is also being monitored by them because they're worried about the Otsutsuki stuff. So that's what's going on there. The sensory unit's also going to support them, and yeah, extreme circumstances. And then you ask them, like, will you do this? And they're like, guess we have to. We're not going to say no at this point. So everyone is in on this. Then we cut to Naruto and Sasuke talking, which is kind of interesting. Sasuke just full on says what I said there, that Boruto is the target of the monitoring as well. You've authorized this. It's surprisingly like Shikamaru-esque what you're doing here. And so, assigning them a mission, putting them in charge of it, will help to control them all in this situation. And that's a good thing. And Naruto's just like, at least we'll know what they're up to rather than dying, like going off on random missions. So that's what's going on there. Then there's some interesting stuff going on here. Shikamaru kind of gives his kind of final orders here. And you just see Boruto standing there, but just sort of peeking out behind Boruto, standing in front of Sarada, is Momoshiki. And the idea, of course, is that no one seems to be able to see him. No one's aware of this. They zoom in on it then. And the only thing that seems to be apparent is that Kawaki gets like the kind of glimpse in a way. It's almost like you get the idea that Momoshiki kind of is there the whole time, but he sort of like activates like an aspect of his power, and suddenly Kawaki's like, oh, what was that? And we do get Sasuke also kind of reacting to this as well. Now, immediately we cut back, and sort of from Kawaki's perspective, he can't see Momoshiki anymore. So this is obviously the setup to the idea that the destined day that Momoshiki has talked about for Boruto, where everything goes wrong, is coming up, and I'm guessing this will play some sort of a role. Because again, Sasuke seems to remember the idea of, it's similar to that day where like he previously got like his first glimpse that like Momoshiki is a part of Boruto in some way. So they're setting that up, and it's interesting because the Momoshiki stuff has always been interesting in Boruto and how this whole dynamic is going to play out. But they don't really tell us all that much. This is such like a tease for okay, we'll do something with this, but not right now. Final panel is just Ada saying, like, Shika dear, you have such intriguing ideas. So she obviously seems to like the idea that, okay, I'm just going to get to sort of jump straight into kind of living with Kawaki and also Boruto. And she knows, like, that part of this is kind of like monitoring and stuff like that, but she's getting what she wants in the middle of all of this, knowing that there's like all this caution going on. So it does set up the idea that, like, when Ada meets everyone, it is going to be somewhat interesting. And they set up, like, where exactly they're going to be staying. Getting the reaction of people watching what's going on will kind of be interesting. And then in the middle of all of this, you do also have the other plot point in the background that Amado, I suppose, once they get back to the village, is apparently going to reveal the truth about what he's actually up to, which to me is probably like the most exciting thing going on in the series right now, which unfortunately means that the code attack, even though it will create the action that we've kind of been wanting for a while, is maybe not the thing I want to happen straight away. I first priority here is sort of like, please, Amado, finally tell us what's up with you. Second, probably then actually is the character dynamic stuff with Ada. And then third, unfortunately for me, it's like, and I guess the code stuff. Because again, we don't really know how exactly this is going to go down. We know now, I suppose, that my prediction was that they would be sent out on a mission to basically find Amado, Ada, and Demon and escort them back to the village. Instead, it's like, okay, we're now village focused. No one's leaving, so that means Code is going to have to come to the village. So there's no conflict necessarily over where things are going to play out as such, what it seems. So that's good. It means we are probably just going to get some time with this happening. I'd be a little surprised at this point if Code, like, interrupts Ada's arrival at the village, because it feels very set up that the whole cohabitation thing is actually going to happen. It'd be a very weird setup if they had this whole chapter setting up that that's what the mission is, only to immediately have an attack come in. Now, maybe it's some sort of a thing, we deal with Code, and then the time skip is actually that, oh yeah, we're going to have to live with Ada for the time skip to gain her loyalty and trust and, you know, help the village in that way, monitor everything. But it does also feel that the Momoshiki thing is a thing that is literally days away, that is going to happen at some point, that he knows that is in Boruto's destiny, that something goes very, very wrong. Now, I think what most people have been leaning towards is probably Sasuke dying, because he had the whole thing of, like, he was not involved in the last incident, and he regrets that because he is Boruto's sensei. So he wants to be there, and now they're directly setting up this, what seems to be a little bit of a rivalry of, like, Sasuke Momoshiki, and the fact that Momoshiki is inside his student. So it feels like him sacrificing himself to save Boruto is probably what's going to happen, maybe, but we have to get there, because again, the problem with Code is that he's in a weird spot where he is powerful, he is notably powerful, but they did such a weird thing with being like, hey, Demon's more powerful than Code. Like, it's just not even a question, just Demon is more powerful. And then even the way he's talked about here, Shikamaru's kind of like, yeah, we could have handled him. Like, if Ada wasn't there, we could have handled Code, no problem. So they're not really bigging up Code all that much, and so it feels like we're waiting for something to happen with him. That I'm guessing the army of clones from the Tail Beast is, the Ten Tails, is going to surprise everyone. But it's all about the timing now, because, again, there are 2 chapters left in this volume. What has to happen in the next chapter is, I think you have to have Ada arriving back at the village. That, I think, just has to happen. You have to have that meeting finally happen. If they are holding off on basically, like, it's going to be a volume ender, like chapter, 74, 75, The end of chapter 75 is when like Ada arrives at the village. That is stretching things out, I think, needlessly. We need to get straight into that cohabitation stuff, I think, in the next episode, and build some stuff to whatever is going to happen. That probably have to have most of next chapter and the chapter after that focus on the first time of them meeting. I guess it makes sense that it goes a bit mayhem. There's potential, and then maybe the attack with code comes in at a point where, like, they don't know what way Ada's going to react to all of that. That would probably be the most dramatic situation. But it feels like for sure the direction of this chapter would confirm that there is no way in just 2 chapters we're getting to the time skip. So we're getting this volume and probably the next volume at the very least. So like say 6 more chapters at least before we get to a time skip. If not more, because they could hold off with Code's attack for a whole longer period of time, to focus on the gimmick in a way of everyone living with Ada type situation. And then once we do get into the action, there again is quite a few moving parts that need to happen, in that you, I guess, are going to have to do something with Sasuke, with Naruto, with Boruto, with Momoshiki, with Kawaki. If something's going to happen to Sasuke, that means you have to have Sarada there and thereabouts. And then Sumire is also here as well. Now, Sumire seems to be here in a way a little bit unfortunate. I like that she is here, but it is interesting that she does primarily seem to be here to be the sort of like counterpart with Ada of like, she has a crush on Boruto, and they're playing on that whole situation. That who knows? Maybe when she actually gets to meet them in person and see their interactions, what if like Ada suddenly switches over and is more interested in Boruto? That would obviously make Sumire jealous. And then in the shipping side of things, I'm assuming Kawaki Sumire has been something that some people are shipping as well. And they might think that's the way to go, or whatever. So there's room for some drama to happen here in all of this. And then let's not also forget that Sarada Boruto is something that they could also do. So the shipping stuff is absolutely on the table here to go for if they want to. But yeah, that is chapter 73. Like I said, I want to make it very clear. I don't think it's awful, but it is a chapter that absolutely represents so much of, I think, the problem with Boruto. That this chapter was, I would say, like, what, 34-ish pages? And that's being kind in the sense that there are certain pages where it's just like a half page of like an Ada reaction. So Ada has somewhere in the region of either like 3 to 6 pages of content over the course of this chapter, but still 34-ish pages. That is literally just sort of Shikamaru telling them what the mission is, explaining Ada's powers for like the 4th time in the series or something like that, and basically just getting the idea, hey, this is the interesting stuff that's going on in the manga with Boruto. This is the interesting stuff that's going on in the manga with Kawaki. Ada's interesting, look at their powers. Now you're all going to live together, because Ada's powers, again, mean that we're in an awkward situation. Also, let's recap the stuff with Code again, because Code is a threat. And it just is like, okay, I get what you're doing, but this is too much. This is just far, far too much. And they do this in the dialogue stuff. They're going to do this when the action starts. You know they're going to do this when the action starts as well. We'll start the fight, and it will be half a chapter of setup taijutsu before we get into the actual stuff that actually matters. And it's like, this is why people don't like the monthly format. That's the thing that I've not seen Boruto in a long time get praise for being a monthly manga. It doesn't feel like it at all. There is potential in this story, in that I think there will be hype when we go into time skip, when we get into the Momoshiki stuff happening and the aftermath, and whatever way they go with Kawaki and Naruto and the setup ahead of the first chapter moment getting there. but they need to deliver. They need very quickly in the next couple of months to somehow transition this to get people back on track, because like I said earlier, this month especially, it really felt like there was quite a bit of like negativity towards Boruto, even from within the community, which is usually relatively good about like appreciating what it has to offer. But this was just like, oh no, like this was the month where just certain bits of news happening. I think also it's stuff like, say, Bleach returning. Bleach in a low position for like a couple of years after it ended. Suddenly it's on the rise again. Its anime is coming back and it looks incredible. And we're kind of like, wow, what are we dealing with over here? Why are we getting this kind of treatment when other franchises are doing a little bit better? And I can see the frustration here that, yeah, Boruto needs to improve sooner rather than later. But they're my thoughts on Chapter 73. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. Otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.